In a world filled with screens and distractions, we invite you to reconnect with the natural world around you. Welcome to Nature Bound, a podcast dedicated to unpacking the intrinsic bond between humans and nature. We'll uncover the benefits of spending time outdoors, including how a nature-centric lifestyle can improve your mental health, elevate your leadership skills, and unleash your creativity. And now here's your host, outdoor enthusiast, and renowned author of The 7 Principles of the Magic Rock, Emmanuel Rose.
I know, Mark, that you're an experienced CEO, CFO, COO, worked in lots of different industries. And I don't care about any of that junk. I want to talk about chukar hunting, but you can introduce yourself how you want.
Well, I'm a chukar hunter now, 90% of the time. I still do a little bit of work here and there, do some contract work, and that's the only reason why I've kept my CPA license all these years. Any rate, though, no, it's all about the bird hunting, and now that the bird hunting season's over, it's the 2 months of dead time till turkey season starts.
Yeah, and it's kind of a sad time that last week of January. You're like, well, I guess it's time to go home and clean everything and get ready for the next season.
I get to the point where I don't know what to do with myself right now, first week or two, because I literally have been hunting continuously since the season opened for grouse since the 1st of September.
Yeah, no, that's good living. Well, I know that you know that I moved down to Nevada recently, and I'm starting to dig into the chukar situation outside of where I live, and so I went and I bought the Nevada Gazetteer. I got BLM maps. I got the Guzzler Atlas that was produced by Fish and Wildlife, and I got Onyx. And so that's where I'm starting from. What am I missing, and what should I be paying attention to?
Well, you're doing basically what I do when I'm going to a new place to cover. I call it desk scouting. But I bought, and they're no longer in business, but the app's still working for me on my laptop. In fact, I keep a old Windows laptop around just to make sure I can keep using it. I still have the DeLorme topo mapping system, and DeLorme went out of business, and Garmin bought their assets, but they discontinued that software product, and I'm not sure there's anything else on the market. I did take the time and effort back in the day to buy the USGS topo overlays for Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and Nevada for that, because the GS topo maps have a lot more information on them. But the key thing with the DeLorme mapping system is I can put it in 3D mode and fly over areas. And so I desk scout. It's like I have Onyx too, but I have the chips, which they've unfortunately also discontinued, because I use them with my GPS tracker for the dogs. But I'll sit there with Onyx open, the Onyx app open, Google Earth open, and the DeLorme topo mapping system open, so that I can look in 3D and then look at it from the air and make sure roads are there and things of that nature. But primarily when I do that, I'm looking for 3 things for a place I've never been.
Yeah,
is rocky, steep, and water.
right.
So,
Okay.
and rocky is really important. I've been in places that had the other two, but if there's no rocks, there's no chukar. So,
And are they using the rocks to huddle under and be secure, or what's the rock thing with the chukar?
I think the big thing for rocks is for the chukar roosting. I mean, I've got spots where I don't. Rocks aren't super important. There's also a thing too. I do a lot of hunting in the Columbia Basin area and steep country, the John Day and Deschutes drainages. And there's a thing called black rock sage up on the flats that they like to sit in too. but
Yeah.
they're always on the edge near rocks. It's
Uh-huh.
kind of interesting. And I think the rocks, like I said, um, really serve a number of purposes. One is escape cover, because I've seen them just burrow into the rocks and they won't come out. I mean, I've watched coveys of chukar fly into rim rock, watched it the whole way, never saw anything come out. The dogs would be birdie, but they aren't leaving the holes in the rocks.
Yeah.
So it's escape cover. I also think they use it for nesting. And I also think they use it for
Oh,
roosting.
yeah. Right.
So, because you'll find, I don't know if you've noticed, but one of the things I look for in those rocks is I'll look for little indentations and chukar droppings. Because that's the other
Right.
thing. Once you get somewhere, if there's no droppings, there's no birds.
Yeah.
Just that simple. It's
Yeah.
kind of akin to what I refer to in steelhead fishing. If you're not there when the fish are in the water, fish in the river, it doesn't matter how good the water is. So it's the same thing. You've got to look for a sign, and chukar and huns too, for that matter. They tend to be in the same areas. They're they're like, and they're also like most other birds and turkeys as well. They're dirty birds. They have droppings everywhere. If you don't see a lot of fresh droppings around, walk around. I typically walk around with my head down and looking for sign. And that's how you can confirm when you go to a place if there really are birds there, notwithstanding running dogs.
Yeah. Understood. And about what's kind of their range, their escape range once you push them up?
I wish I knew. They're not. I hunt a lot of other upland birds. Ruffed grouse usually on the first flush won't go more than about 80 to 100 yards, and if you can see where they went, you can reflush them at least once. Huns, for example, tend to flush in a circle as you get them up. They'll go 300 or 400 yards. I've been in situations, and chukars, if they haven't been pressed before, they won't go that far either.
Yeah.
But once they've been flushed a couple times, once or twice, they've had some pressure put on them. Hell, I've watched them, like I've hunted the breaks of the Grand Ronde. I've watched them fly from Oregon into Washington, for God's sakes. And then that flip side too, not flip side, but additionally, blue grouse are like that as well. I know the shows are about the grouse and all that, or upland in general, but the blue grouse are the same way. I've seen the grouse just literally fly across major canyons. I mean, Snake River, fly from Oregon to Idaho, stuff like that. So anyhow, so where they flush, you got to watch. Sometimes you can watch them and see where they're going to go. Although if you're shooting at them, typically you're not marking them down. A few times I've had some success in marking them down on a flush is when I didn't shoot because they flushed at 80 yards or something like that.
Yeah.
But even then, I have no idea where they go sometimes. I've watched them flush into a canyon, hunted the canyon all the way to the top, never found a bird. And I got, and I'm using big running, all age English setters. And so they're covering ground 300-400 yards on either side too. I have no idea where they went. Right. I mean, I've watched them flush and land at the base of a juniper tree. And I get over there's no birds. The dogs don't even get birdie. I don't know where they go. And
so there's not necessarily, if you flush them up, you're not necessarily going to get a second try at them.
No, but that said, I have friends who have a different hunting style, and sometimes too the birds, and it depends a lot on weather as well. I mean, I've been in situations down in the Oahes where we're hunting at the snow line, and by the way, that's really important. If you can find the snow line, don't leave the snow line.
Okay.
Those birds will flush and stay along the snow line. And sometimes they'll literally come back right to where you flushed them. But, every situation's different.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, if you're hunting like the breaks of the Snake, you're hunting the breaks of the major river drainages here in the Northwest, the Grand Ronde, the Deschutes, the John Day, it's hard in that steep country to really get back at them.
Right.
Believe it or not, the Oahes in a lot of places aren't as steep as, say, the Deschutes or John Day or Snake River Canyon. So you can get back at them, but where do they go exactly? I have no idea.
And what do you think it is they like about that snow line?
I think it's where a green up is and there's more moisture. Like I was going to talk about the black rock sage. Some of these places I hunt, I don't hunt in the canyons. I hunt on the flats where the black rock sage is.
Uh-huh.
And that's the first place to green up in that black rock sage because they're typically in a depression. So I think it's about the green up. And I anecdotally, I've shot chukar with 2 feet of snow on the ground, and every damn one of them had green grass in their crop. They're
Uh-huh.
getting down in the sagebrush wells and digging the green grass out of them.
Oh,
So it's
interesting.
about the green. It's about the
Yeah.
green.
And so are you targeting the east sides of slopes on the slope too, or just the green?
No, just the green.
Yeah.
I do have I don't really hold to it directly, but I do have a bit of a theory that the birds early in the season are on the north and west facing slopes out of the sun. And in fact, I've seen situations early in the season in the Oahes where the dogs were moving and pointing from patch of shade to patch of shade on the northwest side.
Right.
So, but and then I think they do rotate around to the southwest, maybe even early in the season, maybe even the northeast where it's a little bit cooler. But I'm not gonna say just don't bother with the northeast sides at the end of the season. It just
Yeah.
doesn't. But I can tell you right now though, you have some snow and it melts off and there's green grass. Sometimes those birds will get in these little side canyons or in these snow line areas right up on top. They'll be in there as thick as a thickens in a coop.
Yeah.
So, I've been in situations where, in fact, I look for that. If I know there's an area where there's birds and there's been some snow and it's melted off and you got green grass, those birds will be in there thick as flies. Like one property you and I hunt together across from the main canyon. I've gone in
Yeah.
and shot a chukars. There must have been 200 birds in this one small canyon. I mean, it was, you're just like, holy crap. And they were what I call compound rises of chukars and huns together.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And to your point though, it was kind of on the snow line. It had just melted off and they were in there. So you look for the snow line if you can find it. Don't
Yeah.
ever It's like don't ever give up the snow line if you're hunting them in that kind of weather.
Yeah. That's
The frost
interesting.
line too. I mean, whether it's a
Uh-huh.
frost line or the snow line, it's the same thing.
Huh. Yeah, I guess that's the first water is going to start from there, right? And they'll have access to water and food that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's a general. It's just a theory, but I know like when we hunt the Oahes early in the season, uh, the birds are all up on top. They're not down by the lake slash river. They're
Right.
all up on top. And my only theory there is that, and then and along with that theory, I have no idea where those birds are getting water up there. I mean, I've
Right.
hiked all over that country and looked at the maps. I have no idea where they would get water, but they're up on the very tops. And my theory is that's gets the first moisture in the season. That might get fog up there and
Yeah.
collect some moisture as you get into October and November. So, but it's about the green grass, not so much perennial water sources.
Interesting. So then, you're you're tracking them down on the snow. I like that. That's a good tip because there's a lot of the snow comes in down here a lot, obviously. Um, but we're at like 4,000 feet and then it kind of sticks, between 4 and 6,000 feet, it sticks pretty tight. What other things should I be looking for when I'm desk surveying, desk scouting?
I like to look for remote places too.
Yeah.
And that's just a personal preference. I'll look. In fact, I was just doing that over the weekend because it was raining all weekend. I was looking for spots down in the Oahes where, I'm 25, 30 miles from a paved road.
Yeah.
Try to get into these spots. Uh, and again, looking for steep, rocky, and some water accessibility. So, and there's some areas where um, I insist that, when we hunt, we don't give up what I call the main canyon.
Hmm.
In super good years, chukars will be all over the place, like in the Oahes or Snake River country. And for God's sakes, I've shot them up in the timber and the breaks of the Snake and the Grand Ronde and stuff. I mean, it's
Yeah.
kind of jokingly referred to as timber chukars. But that said, if in a normal year, those birds are concentrated on the main canyons where there's water. And part of that, I think, is in the wintertime, if you get bad weather, they can move vertically to get out of the bad weather.
Mhm.
And if you do have a super bad year, it will kill off all the birds in the outlying areas. And the only ones that survive and reproduce for the next bird season are the ones in the main canyons that can go from 4,000 feet down to 1,200 feet or something like that.
Right. Yeah. So what is it? What have you noticed about what produces the big numbers year over year?
Oh, the first of all, let me start with there's no such thing as a 4-year-old chucker.
Okay.
And it probably generically could say there's no such thing as a 4-year-old upland bird. It's a tough business going through life as a protein source.
Yeah, for sure.
And so you need a good hatch at least every other year just to maintain the
Mhm.
numbers. And but if you can get good successive hatches, and assuming too that the habitat is in good shape, those birds will spread out all over the place. You'll
Right.
be finding them in sand dunes sometimes because they get pushed out and they're looking for places to roost and to live. But it's all about the hatch. I mean, I've read stuff from like Oregon Fish and Wildlife Department and other game commissions where they say that you lose 80% of your upland birds from year to year.
Oh, wow.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so clear. I don't think it's quite as severe as that, but clearly, if you lose 80% to whatever reason, predation, whatever, you need a good hatch every year, or at least a modicum of a hatch. So, if and then what backing into that, if you get a really bad winter and it kills off a lot of birds, you may be 4 or 5 years before you see decent bird numbers again because you need
Sure.
nesting pairs too.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
so back to the original question, it's about the hatch. And I kind of a mercenary view of things is one of the things I think it happens in the area for chuckers in the Northwest. And really, you're talking about the Great Basin area, obviously not on the west side of the Cascades. They aren't native. And I don't think they're quite as tuned because of that, to the weather patterns.
Yeah.
So it's odd that I think some of my best years, because I've been keeping a log for, 35 years. Some of my best chucker hunting years are when we've had a cold, wet spring, which apparently wipes out the original hatch. And then when they re-nest, the weather's much better.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And so, at any rate, but you need and that's the conundrum with chuckers and a lot of these upland birds is you need good spring moisture. You need good moisture at some point for two reasons. One, you have to have a good green up or the hens or the females won't be in shape to nest. And two, that also generates good escape cover for the chicks. And then
Mhm.
what goes along with that is grasshoppers. Remember, earlier talked about green grass in the late, in the fall time, in the fall for the birds. That's
Yeah.
important. But the insects, the grasshoppers, and the summer is what grows your chicks and makes them healthy. Because there's really no green grass at the end of the day in the summer, particularly in
For
a lot of
sure.
these places.
Yeah, especially at that kind of elevation. So yeah, they need to go omnivore and
Mhm.
get some bugs going, huh? That's interesting.
But
So
that none of that's a science.
yeah, yeah, it's what you've been observing, right?
That's all.
Yeah. Well, we had pretty good numbers of Chucker this year. How was it historically from what you observed?
It was probably one of the top 3 or 4 chucker years,
Yeah.
but it's a little, I mean, some of that is, I mean, in terms of seeing numbers of birds, I have to be the first one to admit the log that I keep is not statistically been normalized for number of guns in the field and days and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And then some of the areas I hunt that I still hunt just because I can, the chucker numbers have really become depressed and probably never recover because of habitat loss.
Uh-huh.
And that has nothing to do with the ranchers or farmers or anything, but because of invasive grass. And so I don't, even though we saw a lot of birds this year, it was good chucker numbers. It still wasn't a record year and probably will never approach a record year
Yeah.
in terms of the number of birds. But it was a really good year. The last couple of years have been really good chucker years, particularly down in the southeast part of the state, and even up along the Snake breaks of the Snake River and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, it was the same in down in Nevada. They said some of the guys were saying it was like an infestation of chukar.
That's interesting because I used to go down to Nevada a lot,
Yeah,
and I've been always keep an eye. Of course, helicopter crash, they don't do the brood surveys like they used to, but I was looking at their, and again, I don't know how scientific it is really, looking at their chicks per adult, and they've seemed to have been depressed for the last number of years. That's why I haven't gone down. But
yeah,
you're saying that it was way better than they had reported.
yeah. That's what the word on the street is, and again, you know, even just with a flushing dog and not knowing what I was doing, I found birds half the time I went. So that was, you know, lucky. And I think this is a one of those mild winters. We'll see how the spring is. You know, it has the potential with this La Nina to be another good brood year, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean it's been green, or probably a better way to put it, it's never not been green this year everywhere. I
Right.
mean, we didn't quite have as wet a spring as we had the year before, but I'm sitting here looking out over the Deschutes Canyon and it's green. It's
Yeah.
green, green, green. And
Yeah.
we had really bad weather a couple of weeks ago with ice storms, iced over snow, and I was worried that that can kill birds, and
Sure.
just because they can't get to their food supply. But once it started to melt and I got back out, it didn't affect the birds any way whatsoever. And the
Yeah.
ones I killed all had green grass in it as well.
So they know how to track down the green grass.
Absolutely.
That's the moral of the story here.
Yeah, it is. Green, green, green. So we're set up, to your point. I think we're set up for another good hatch this year.
Yeah.
And I think, switching your question around a little bit, what are the worst years I've seen? When we've had what I call winter droughts,
Hmm.
where it never greens up. So there's no hatch. That happened 2 years in a row back in 2006 and 2007. You didn't notice it in
Right.
2007 because there was a good carryover of birds from 2006.
Interesting.
But excuse me, I got my years a little off. 2005, 2006. But when 2007 rolled around, it was a disaster. There were just no birds. There were just
Yeah.
no birds, no birds, no birds. And there were no young birds. And that's one of the
Wow.
things I look for,
Uh-huh.
particularly early in the season, is if we're shooting young birds, birds of the year, I call them, as
Yeah.
opposed to the what I call the branch antler chuckers. One because hunting a lot in the Oahes, particularly also in the Columbia Basin area, this has got a much longer growing season, so to speak, because of
And you
the
can just tell
elevation.
by, are they just girthier and
Oh,
heavier?
they're just huge. I mean,
Yeah.
I've shot some chuckers here in the Deschutes Canyon that are easily as big as a hen pheasant and as big as the butt section of my shotgun.
That's a big
So
chucker.
it's a big chucker, and they're not, and there's quite a lot of them like that. What I don't like to see though is that if we go out and we shoot several birds and they're all that big, because
Yeah.
you want to see some smaller ones. Now you get later into the season, it's tougher to tell, but early in the season,
Yeah.
you should be shooting a good number of smaller birds, more the size of huns than chuckers.
Because those birds are like 5 or 6 months old at that point.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
And the other thing that's interesting is I keep hearing conflicting reports. Some biologists say they'll have multiple broods. Others say no. Once they've had a brood, they won't renest
Yeah.
or won't have another brood. I don't know, because my anecdotal observations have been I've seen uh, chucker chicks in September in some of the places I hunt, even at low
Yeah.
elevation.
Right.
And I've seen, and quail are the same way. I've seen situations where there's four different size quail and a covey of quail running across the road in some
Yeah.
places. So I don't know, but it doesn't hurt. And it could be what you're seeing is a brood got wiped out too.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
anyhow, and that, and again, it's the other thing they say is if you're going to have a bad hatch, hope they all die. I know that's terribly mercenary,
Yeah.
because allegedly, if even one chick survives, they won't renest. If
Oh, interesting. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and if they completely lose the clutch, they'll renest.
Yeah.
That was my point earlier. If they renest, it's later in the year. They
Yeah.
got good cover, good green up, but you're not going to see the cold and wet weather as you get into June and July. You get better brood counts.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, no trip afield is complete without eating the prey. So give me a recipe that you like for the chucker.
Oh, there's any number of different. I mean, anything you do with a chicken, you can do with a chucker or pheasant or any other game bird for that matter. I like to brine the birds, a little salt water at first.
Hmm.
I've also gone to starting off some of the recipes by pressure cooking them and really tenderizing them. But the one thing that's most important when you clean the bird and go to use it for table fare, pull the sinews out of it. There's
Hmm.
a sinew in the tender that you can just pull out by hand,
Yeah.
and then there's a sinew in the main breast that you can kind of fillet out and around. You got to get
Okay.
those out, or they'll be tougher than nails.
Yeah.
It's like chewing on uh, string or
Yeah.
hemp, perhaps.
Yeah.
So, but I'll stuff them. I'll cut them into stuff them with mushrooms and stuff and grill them, marinate them and grill them. Make checker fettuccine, make what I call checker chips, where you cut them up and fry them up and whatever breading you like, and serve them with some sauces. And there's anything you can't do with them.
Yeah.
I'll make checker piccata, etc., and
Nice.
so on.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Well, good stuff. Well, any last words of advice for me as I'm continuing to dig in down here?
oh, you haven't asked about dogs yet.
Well, I know I've got the wrong dog for the job, so that's part of the reason why.
Well, yeah, it's I guess it's uh if you're going to hunt primarily pheasants or even quail for that matter,
Yeah.
a flushing dog, whether it's one of the what I call true flushing breeds, or a lab, which is utilitarian breed and so on,
Yeah.
that's fine. But you're not gonna, you've got a tough road if you're gonna hunt a flushing dog with limited range on chuckers.
Yeah.
Because like I was saying, I go whether the year's good or bad. In
Yep.
fact, in keeping the log, it's kind of amusing. I actually go more days when the hunting is bad than I do when the
Right.
hunting is good. And so if you get a situation where like and I've seen this, where you get a marginal year and there's maybe one covey of chucker per square mile,
Yeah,
chances of you walking those up with a flushing dog are going to be pretty slim.
for sure. Yeah.
And so that's why you have these. It's better to have a big running, what they call all age dogs
Yeah.
that are out and casting 300-400 yards. So I mean, I'm not to be um, uh, cruel or anything, but it's like I don't take my pointing dog duck hunting.
Right.
Why would you take your duck dog chucker hunting?
Yeah, for sure.
So, I'm not saying, no, don't get me, but that said, I have hunted with labs, combination of labs and pointing dogs, and that's absolutely lethal
Yeah.
with these upland, particularly with chuckers and huns, because one of the real tricks with chucker gunning is actually knowing where they're going to be.
Uh,
I mean, the dog's on point. You mark the wind off its nose, and you try and walk into the wind because you assume that's where the chuckers are. But that doesn't mean that's where they were when they got pointed. That doesn't necessarily mean that's where they're going to flush from.
yeah,
And having a flushing dog to work in tandem with a pointing dog takes all the guesswork out of it. It's
for
almost not
sure.
fair.
Yeah,
It's
right.
almost not fair.
Well, that's good. That means I've got something to offer the pointing dog guys down here. So
That's right.
the Springer Spaniel support.
No, if you can. Some of my best chucker days are when friends had labs and keep the lab on heel and then release them on the point. Of
Yeah,
course, you have to make sure you got a pointing dog that's very steady.
right. Right.
But that said, that's just a lethal combination, and that's borrowed from what they do down south in the
Uh-huh.
quail plantations.
I got you. Yeah, that's cool. Well, good. I enjoyed it. I appreciate your time and thanks for coming on the Nature Bound podcast. And
My pleasure.
look forward to catching up with you soon and
Yep.
getting out there. All right,
Yep.
thanks,
Looking
Mark.
forward to it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Nature Bound. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss a future episode. If you found value in today's episode, please share with someone who needs to hear it. Be sure to purchase your copy of The 7 Principles of the Magic Rock at emmanuelrose.com or on Amazon. We thank you again for joining us today, and remember to get nature bound.